Hello, in this lecture we will discuss about the leadership. Leadership is another important aspect of management. We have covered so far the evolution of management thought. We thought about the objectives, how important the objectives are. Then we also looked at the management by objectives. Then we have examined the process of planning, organizing, departmentation. Then we have also discussed the communication and the oral and the written forms of communication. So, in this lecture we will focus on various dimensions of leadership and then do a complete analysis of leadership, how it functions in the organization, how it enables the achievement of the set goals. So, when you see today's objective, at the end of this session you must be able to know and understand the concept of leadership, the types of leadership, the leadership theories, and we should be able to look at various dimensions. Let us look at the various views what people have expressed. I would like to cover this aspect quickly so that I can spend little more time on theories of leadership. So, when we see leadership and the concept how it has emerged, leadership is the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of goals. I think this could be the simplest view or the simplest definition. Key words are, it is the ability to influence, ability of the individual to influence others, and the other part is the group. So, the leadership happens in the context of more than one person. So, two or more people forms the group, and the group is there to look at or the emergence of any leadership attempts. So, there is influence and the group and the achievement of goals. I think these are the key things in the first view of what the leadership is all about. The next view, if you see, leadership is the process of influencing and supporting others to work enthusiastically towards achieving objectives. So, achieving objectives is common, achievement of goals as we stated in the previous definition, but influence is also there. It is a process of influencing. So, one was ability to influence as an innate capacity of the leader or the acquired capacity of the leader, but we are now talking about leadership as the process, as a process of influencing and supporting others. So, it is like enabling or supporting others and work enthusiastically. So, you are talking about now energizing the other or creating that feeling of initiative in the other. So, it is not through force. I think that is the view of this second view of the leadership. Leadership is the catalyst that transforms potential into reality. So, what is this leadership is that to bring out the best in the individuals, the best in the individuals, intellectual best, it may be the physical best, it may be their emotional best. That means leadership brings best in the people, emotional, intellectual as well as physical, into reality. So, that means towards doing something where you can see it is visible. Another view is it is an interpersonal influence exercised in a situation and directed through the communication process towards the attainment of a specialized goal or a specific goal. So, in other words, it is an interpersonal influence, one-to-one influence, and exercised in a particular context or a particular situation, and there is an attempt for direction, and it is through the communication process that you move an individual towards common goal or achievement of the stated goals. So, if you look at any of these things, leadership view has emerged as an influencing process, energizing the individual, use the group as a medium, but the focus is the end results. So, the leadership is the process of committing group of people to specific goals. It is the critical factor that helps an individual or group to identify goals and motives. It assists in achieving the stated goals. So, any number of views and statements, if you see that the leadership, the individual, the influence and achievement of goals, all these things go together. Without leadership, an organization would be only a confusion of people and machines, and it is an orchestra without a director, would be only musicians and instruments. So, what can be there is the kind of noise. So, orchestra and all other organizations require leadership to develop their precious assets to the fullest. So, what we are talking about is that the coordination, what we talked about earlier, communication and organization. So, organizing, communication, coordination all can come to the picture through the leadership, which binds all of these things. That is how the several statements are made, and here is one: without leadership, how an organization would be, what the sage Valmiki wrote. So, he wrote, like a herd of cattle without keeper, like an army without a general, like a night without a moon, like a group of cows without bull, such would be the country where the king is not seen. I think this is the kind of a statement he made, which summarizes the importance of leadership, the importance of direction, importance of communication, importance of coordination, importance of control. So, the leadership process is similar in effect to that of secret chemical that turns a caterpillar into a butterfly. What we talked about, the potential to reality. This role is often seen dramatically in giant organizations. See how CEO Jack Welch of GE led the transformation from a sleeping giant in 1980s into a sleek organization in the 1990s. So, when you look at the role of the CEOs, the people compare the top quality of the leadership. Examples are many, but to mention quickly that the qualities of, if you look at Bill Gates, so the organization like Microsoft, so he brought it from nowhere and then got that international acceptance and recognition. So, we see the leadership happening at the highest level or at the summit level. So, we can quote certainly our Mahatma Gandhi, then you see the kind of role models, the current one, the Narayan Murthy of Infosys. So, when you see such people who have shown extraordinary capacity and capability in understanding and leading and creating organizations. When we talk leadership, the leadership can be there at all levels. So, today when you see in all cases, the leadership is the ultimate act that identifies, develops channels and enriches the potential that is already in an organization and its people. A leader not only commits his followers to organizational goals, he also pools needed resources, guides and motivates subordinates to reach the goals. So, clearly putting all the resources together, helping people to do what they want and clearly energizing them to meet the set goals. That is the key of any of this leadership. So, leadership is not the mere use of people and their potential for realizing organizational goals. It is not only that, but it has the ultimate aim of raising the level of human conduct. So, when you see the leadership, people have given lot of emphasis of this, where ethical aspiration of both leader and the led. That means the ends are important, but the means are equally important. I think that is the leadership. So, when you see leadership and the importance, which can be explained in several ways, leadership style is the typical approach of a particular person used to lead people. So, we start with a clear understanding of what the leadership style all about. So, the behavior of a leader exhibits during the supervision of subordinates, and this supervisor and subordinate relationship and how it is conducted, what are the attempts and how superior gets the best out of the people is seen in terms of the leadership style. So, when you see the leadership style, it could be divided into several things, but it is divided into 4 types. The first typification or the way the people have classified is based on the amount of authority retained by the leader. So, typically you will see the 3 things: an authoritarian style, a participative style, and free-rein style or the Autocratic. The authoritarian style, the individual exercises the complete control over the group, whereas in the participative style he gives up his authority to the group, involves them. In a laissez-faire he is nowhere. So, the 3 styles are based on the how much power he shares with the group. The other classification is styles based on the relative emphasis placed on the task to be performed versus that placed on the people. So, in other words, you see the classification coming in: set of managers high on task and low on the relationship. And there are second category of leaders and the managers, they are high on task and high on relationship. But you will also see high relationship and the low task, and low relationship and the low task. So, if you see this, what is this leadership style which is neither concerned with relationship nor with the task? You will see these kinds of leadership can come where very young people are asked to work with set of people, even though the young fellows are in the supervisory positions. They find it extremely difficult to structure work with respect to the task as well as relationship. This is also true with people who are about to retire. So, neither they are concerned with the task nor concerned with the relationship. So, when you see the next step could be they are high on relationship and low on task, that is at the C. The high relationship, low task people are called typically in the Blake and Mountain kind of a model like country club managers. So, all the time they are pleasing people, but they are not really concerned about the task completion. There is no concern for production. You will also find managers who are highly concerned with the task, but having very low concern for relationship, where they are highly intolerant of the views of the people, and they think people come to the organization to do only the task, achievement of the goals, and they do not care if they have some problems. They tend to be autocratic in dealing with human issues. So, according to several of the authors, what is required for effective leadership is to have a high task, high relationship kind of a style. So, the style variations can come with respect to what is their concern with respect to the task and the relationship. You will also see the leadership is based on the assumption what the people make. It is called as the style based on the assumptions about people made by the leader, and they are theory X and theory Y. Theory X believes that people are lazy, people can't respond, and theory Y believes that people are capable and they have their own interest to perform and excel. We will see these differences later on, but it comes about the philosophy and the assumptions about of the leader, how he perceives, how he treats his colleagues and subordinates, and these assumptions are there in the minds of the leader. Entrepreneurial leadership style is another, where the individual adopts the collegial kind of a thing. He uses the group, but I think uses the group is a wrong thing, but he works with the group to ensure and achieve the stated goals. So, the entrepreneurial thing would involve high risk taking, low structuring of the organization. People can take initiatives and make mistakes. There is apart from risk taking, there is also experimentation. People sit together and solve the problems and develop innovative culture. So, these are all characteristics of the entrepreneurial kind of leadership style. So, let us look at some of these styles in detail. When we look at authoritarian or autocratic style, the autocratic leaders centralize power and decision making. One of the things is that they do not delegate the power to the other levels. To the extent possible, they decide and convey the views to the others. They structure the complete work situation for their employees, who are expected to do what they are told and not think for themselves. So, in the autocratic style, there is no scope for thinking for the others. You should do what I say. I think that is the kind of a style statement. That means you may assume that the other persons cannot think, or you may think it is not necessary for them to think and imagine. So, better to define every step and structure the whole process, and that is what the authoritarian style all about. Authoritarian or autocratic style, what is normally called, the leader takes the full authority and assumes full responsibility. It may come because of their own anxiety, or they may also think that the others are not capable of, or they may think it is extremely important to keep everything to themselves. So, autocratic leadership typically is negative, based on threats and punishments. They believe that people can be coerced. So, that is how it is seen as negative. But it may be externally, it may also can appear to be very positive, but the approach of the leader is to drive, and not only there is drive with a force, with a threat of punishment, pushing people, and that is how the authoritarian or autocratic style has been seen as highly negative by people who talk about human relations and development of creativity and such things. Some advantages of autocratic leadership are, it is often satisfying for the leader, it is ego fulfilling, or it is also called as the ego striving. People also call it as bull in the china shop. So, these are all the expression where it is fine for the leader. Permits quick decision because he is forcing his decision onto the others, allows the use of less competent subordinates. So, you can work with people who are much less competent, who do not think, who do not question, and it provides security and structure for employees, because all the time decisions are made by the leader, the subordinates are just to follow those things. So, they work only for some of the specific rewards, and it is also said that people work at the punishment avoidance level. They will do only that much, but the disadvantage is the most employees dislike it. They may not express it openly, but the feelings get suppressed by the authoritarian leader, especially if it is extreme enough to create fear and frustration. So, the moment the authoritarian leader moves with fear, then the corollary, the other side is the frustration. The suppressed views can come to the surface at one point or the other, as people say, water will find its own level. So, it is seldom it generates the strong organizational commitment among employees, and finally it leads to low turnover and high absenteeism rates. In other words, it leads to the turnover, and also the high absenteeism rates where people do not come to the organization, and people also quit, people also leave the organization psychologically. So, authors like Hersey have talked about very extensively the negative consequences of the autocratic or the authoritarian leadership styles. Participative style on the other has several of the positive things. Participative leaders decentralize authority, the leaders and group act as a social unit. Participative decisions are not unilateral as with that of autocratic style, because they arise from consultation with followers and participation by them. So, the participative leaders, they share and give powers. People are free to communicate with each other, they can ask questions, they set the goals which are mutually acceptable and convenient. They look for different methods of achieving the task, they think and apply their mind, there is much more involvement, and hence people also see there is much more open climate leading to better commitment. Clarity is also much more in the participative style. Employees are informed about conditions affecting their jobs and encouraged to express their ideas and make suggestions. The general trend is towards wider use of participative practices because they are consistent with supportive and collegial models of organizational behavior. So, organizational behavior theories are talking about normative models. In the normative models, it is generally accepted today that you need to have much more participative style, consultative style compared to authoritarian or autocratic style. The free rein, or also it is called the a kind of an ad hoc kind of a style, do come at different levels of leadership within the organization. These leaders avoid power and responsibility. So, they depend largely on the group to establish its own goals and work its own problems. That means the leaders are appointed, but either they are unable to exercise their authority, or at some times it is better you leave it to the group to evolve what is best suited or best to be done under the circumstances. So, the group members train themselves and provide their own motivation. The leader plays only a minor role. So, the leader plays the role of a facilitator. So, he is there and he is not there. So, he takes that kind of a position. It is suited for many of the developmental purposes, particularly when lab training, the group needs to take its own sweet time to establish norms and understand each other. So, it is good to have a free rein kind of a style where the leader is more of a laissez-faire, not intervening much, not creating any negative feelings amongst the members. He allows the group to evolve its own norms and then he views how they move towards the performing levels. All the three styles are important, but if you see, it is more advantageous to move towards participative style of functioning. High task low relationship, as we talked about, is the leader emphasizes the how to get things task accomplished and spends minimum time giving psychological support. So, he is not there, but all the time he is there to talk about the task, the goals, the steps, the objectives. But when people have problems, people have differences of views, he would rather ignore it or he would like to suppress it. So, this style may also be well suited to the situation where seasonal help is involved, where people are not really requiring a day-to-day guidance and day-to-day help. Seasonal employees may be unfamiliar with the task and these require direct guidance on performing the work properly. So, it may be suitable for certain situations. A high task low relationship leader is not necessarily rude or discourteous, but he is more bothered about the task. The leader simply takes the expedient route of focusing on work rather than people. So, his lack of concern for people can lead to lack of commitment, lack of participation, of the individuals. So, the high task high relationship, if you see, as I mentioned, it is much more desirable and much more effective, because this leader spends considerable time showing people how to get the work done and providing them the psychological support. So, you need to contrast this particular style with all the remaining three. This high task and high relationship style is considered generally useful because it results in high productivity and the personal satisfaction. So, people get challenged, people do achieve those tasks, but there is also high support from the leader. So, a more critical look at this style would suggest that it works best in situations where people need an active and involved leader. So, leader is there, he is able to redefine the task to meet the human expectation, but he is also able to readjust the human expectations to meet the end goals. So, the high task high relationship, if you see, particularly effective where employees are lacking self confidence and technical skills. A leader using this high relationship and low task style, if you see, gives employees much encouragement and support, but a minimum of guidance about the task accomplishment, whereas here he is able to provide both high task and high concerns. But high relationship and low task, if you see, in some situations employees need the more psychological support rather than the technical instructions. The high relationship and low task style is suitable in such situations where the individuals know what they are supposed to do, they are well trained, specifically if you see the R&D or scientific kind of an establishment, where you do not have to work on their task roles, because basically they know what to perform and how to go about it, these knowledge workers, whereas they can be supported by the leaders having high relationship. So, the high relationship low task could be better suited there. Low relationship and low task, if you see, it is neither here nor there, essentially a free-rein style. Subordinates are given considerable latitude in performing their work. The style can be effective when subordinates are highly skilled, psychologically mature, but really there is no leadership action. So, you can see all the four different styles. However, the summary is that one need to use or develop high concern for task and high concern for relationship. I think that is the normative model what people have talked time and again. However, all the remaining three styles could be suited under certain circumstances, or it may be more effective depending on the kind of people. The theory X and theory Y we talked about depending on what assumption a leader makes about his or her followers. The styles are distinguished based on that assumption. This classification is based on McGregor's famous set of assumptions, what he talked about as theory X and theory Y assumptions. If you see the theory X, leaders are autocratic, they distribute people and believe in close supervision and tight control over their subordinates, because they think if you allow them to do whatever they want, they will do things according to their convenience. So, theory X, people do not believe in their subordinates. Theory Y leaders are much more participative. They trust their subordinates and allow them to participate in decision making. So, the theory X believes them as lazy, they need to be forced, punishment would be the most appropriate. Theory Y believes that people are basically have a great liking for their work, challenge and participation are essentially essential tools to get the best out of the people. We also talked about the entrepreneurship kind of a leadership. Entrepreneur is a person who converts an innovative idea into business and the word entrepreneur is generally associated with small scale industry, what we talked about the sole trader earlier. Based on both their personality characteristics and the circumstances of operating a business, many entrepreneurs use similar leadership style. So, you see a commonality in them: collegiality, the give and take, high risk, and pushing people towards experimentation, and also taking very calculated risk. So, the most notable features of this style are impatience and business towards the employees, because the entrepreneur is always busy. A heavy task orientation combined with very direct approach of giving instructions to employees, and sometimes you also push through this charismatic personality who inspires others to do business with him or her. A much strong interest in dealing with customers than employees, because the business development seems to be more important than keeping the relationship with own people. Entrepreneurship style also a strong dislike for bureaucratic rules and regulations, an anxiety to consolidate business gains as quickly as possible. So, the speed, action, response, direction, so it comes in that kind of a combination. Let us also look at some of the leadership theories. The important leadership theories are, quickly to mention, the trade theory or the trade approach, then behavioral theories, Ohio State studies, University of Michigan studies, talked about the managerial grade, and some of the Scandinavian studies. We also have some of the contingency theories, Fiedler's model, Hersey and Blanchard's situational theory, or the life cycle model, and the leader member exchange theories, path goal theories, leader participative model, and also we have some of the neo charismatic theories. What I intend to do is to cover some of the things in a manner where you will appreciate how people have approached the leadership and how they have theorized about. Let us look at the trade theory of leadership. In early days of trade theories, it is said that leaders are born and not made. So, that means they come with set of inborn traits, and one Bennis completed a 5-year study of 90 outstanding leaders and their followers. So, he identified 4 common traits shared by 90 leaders. So, these approaches were that there are strong and very common traits are there, traits like emotionality, traits means aggressiveness, traits means that you are extrovert. So, many of these are considered as traits. So, the studies of this nature started seeing, are there any common traits present in effective leaders. So, you picked effective leaders, studied them for the absence or presence of set of traits, and also the traits which are common amongst several of the leadership or leaders. So, if you see the trait theory of leadership, so people are able to give many of the things: management by attention, the ability to communicate a sense of outcome, goal or direction that attracts followers. So, you are able to communicate a sense of purpose to the others. Management by meaning, the ability to create and communicate meaning with clarity and understanding. So, people can relate today's action, what implication it has for tomorrow. Or the trait theory of leadership also talked about the management by trust, the ability to be reliable and consistent. The management by self, the ability to know oneself and to use one's skills within the limits of one's strengths and weaknesses. So, we started seeing the varieties of approaches coming out of these trait theories, but the trait theorists but certainly it is one of the oldest schools, and they were started seeing, still today we are talking about personality and the leadership theories. People are talking about the big 5 aspects which are common amongst the leaders and the managers. Certainly the extraversion seemed to be one of the common things across the several studies across the cultures. Ohio State Studies of Leadership is in 1945. The leadership studies was carried out by Bureau of Business Research at Ohio State University, and they attempted to identify various dimensions of leadership behavior. We have talked about this little earlier. The research directed by Ralph narrowed the description of leadership behavior to two dimensions: the initiating structure and the consideration. The same thing what we talked about earlier, that is the concern for task and the concern for relationship. But here the concern for relationship is the consideration, and the initiating structure comes as the task dimension. So, initiating structure refers to a type of leadership behavior that describes the extent to which a leader is task oriented and directs the subordinates the work activities towards goal achievement. So, some leaders state all the steps, define all the things whatever is required, that is essentially this task structuring. Consideration refers to a type of leadership behavior that describes the extent to which a leader is sensitive to subordinates, respects their feelings, and establishes mutual trust. As we talked about the relationship side, the consideration what he has for the people. So, the concern for people and concern for the task. In combination, we see how the leadership could emerge. One could be high on both, one could be low on both, or one could be high on task and high on structuring. The Fiedler's contingency model proposes that effective group performance depends upon the proper match between the leader's style and the degree to which the situation gives control to the leaders. So, here the Fiedler's model talks about that within the group you need to look at the least preferred co-worker. So, within this it sees that it contains 16 contrasting adjectives such as pleasant and unpleasant, effective, ineffective, open or guarded, supportive, hostile, so that what kind of preference you have for the members. So, in a low LPC score means leader is task oriented, and a high LPC scores means leader is relationship oriented. So, what is your preference of dealing with the other? So, after assessing the leader through this least preferred co-worker model, the leader is to match with the situation, seeing the kind of people what he has. Hersey and Blanchard, the situational theory, they talked about the how this leadership model can be viewed as a kind of a contingency situation. Successful leadership is achieved by selecting right leadership style. What is this right leadership style? He talked about regardless of what the leader does, effectiveness depends on the action of his or her followers. The term readiness refers to the extent to which people have the ability and willingness to accomplish a specific task. So, that means when you deal with group of people, you have to change your style. Initial stage, in one state where you have to take lot more initiative, put people together, explain the task, but after some time you may have to reduce your communication and interaction, allow the group to mature, and you also have to see sometimes how much to continue with or how much to stop. It is also called as a situational leadership theory. So, if followers are unable and unwilling to do a task, the leader needs to give clear and specific direction. If they are matured enough, then you allow them to participate, you allow them to think. So, depending upon the group, depending upon the situation, depending upon their maturity, the leader takes different roles. If followers are unable and willing, the leader needs to display high task orientation to compensate for the followers' lack of ability, high relationship orientation to get followers to buy in to the leader's desire. So, if followers are able and unwilling, the leader needs to use a supportive and participative style. If employees are both able and willing, the leader need not to do much. So, depending upon the ability, depending upon the willingness, depending on the maturity, the leader changes his style to meet the specific expectations of the group, but the concern is to achieve the stated task. Hersey and Blanchard, if you see further, they also got into that, the started emphasizing on the situation. So, several decision making models emerged in the field. Vroom-Eaton model is another important contribution, how leadership and decision making go together. So, they established a theory that provides a set of rules to determine the form and amount of participative decision required in different situations. So, the Vroom-Eaton model talked about that at many situations as a leader you would have decided, because the choices are not too many, and that is the type there is no point in asking the group to participate and create an alternative. So, you give the decision to the group. At some situations you have made the decision, but you want the group to respond to those things. In other situation you do not know how to go about it, you leave the complete thing to the group itself. So, he classified various decision making situations. It would depend upon how much you know the task and also the details of the task and the task completion. So, it depended very clearly the contingency of the decision situation, the importance of the decision, the importance of obtaining subordinates' commitment of the decision. So, sometimes it is consensus method of decision making is fine, where it may take lot of time, but you would involve all of them. How well you have structured the problem is also in another dimension. So, the Vroom-Eaton talked about that, whether the leader has sufficient information to make a good decision or not, whether subordinates have the necessary information to make a good decision. So, all the 5 things become extremely important to follow a particular leadership style. Importance of the leader to minimize the time to make the decision. So, the time is another element. So, the Vroom-Eaton talked about all these characteristics of how to take a particular style depending upon not on the maturity of the group, but decision making situation as well as the maturity of the group in terms of the information and the ability. Finally, the charismatic leadership is what we are talking about, the born leadership. So, charismatic leadership theory says that followers make attribution of heroic or extraordinary leadership abilities when they observe certain behavior. So, what charisma is basically innate. Some people accept some of the leadership positions very comfortably. So, the key characteristics are, apart from that innate things, the vision and articulation. They are able to visualize a future situation and articulate what different individuals should do. They also take risk of conveying those ideas and also committing themselves to that particular task. They are also very sensitive to what is happening in their environment, and they are also very sensitive to the followers' needs, and they are able to link the followers' requirements and the needs to the kind of vision and the purpose. And most of the time the charismatic leaders pick an unconventional behavior. So, suddenly you see the kind of changes which can come in these charismatic leaders to define a symbol, a set of actions and a philosophy. So, the charismatic leadership, if you see, they have a vision expressed as an idealized goal that proposes a future better than the status quo. So, they question, also people call that as they break the rules. They are able to clarify the importance of vision in terms of in terms that are understandable to others. That is where their communication becomes extremely important. They are able to explain their views in terms of the experiences of the other, particularly of their followers and the subordinates. The personal risk, they are willing to take on high personal risk, incur high cost, and engage in self-sacrifice to achieve the goal. They are also sensitive to the others, so they understand what are the constraints, what are the resources, and how to bring about change. They are also concerned about the followers and their leaders. The charismatic leaders are perceptive of others' abilities, responsibilities, and then they also see what are their needs and feelings and how they can integrate all this into a kind of a movement. An unconventional behavior, as we mentioned earlier, charismatic leaders engage in behavior that is perceived as novel and counter to norms. Some people also say normally they do what is known as anti-benchmarking. So, if all of others are following certain methods, these people come with extremely innovative methods of handling the issues. So, when you see the leadership has been considered as the most important and core element of the management. The communication, coordination, control, organization all happens because of the effective leadership. Effective leadership is concerned not only about the group, but also it is concerned about the goals. So, the group and goals come in different ways, and that is where you see some leaders can become highly goal driven, and when they are highly goal driven they can neglect the relationship and the group. So, you see it is also leading to the autocratic style of leadership. As you see this autocratic leadership, then it suppresses the views of the subordinates, it creates feelings of resentment, it also creates a tension and anxiety within the group. However, sometimes you see with certain groups an autocratic leadership becomes very effective because there is not much scope for thinking, there is not much initiatives are expected amongst the group members. Consistently people have rejected autocratic or authoritative style of leadership. On the other, we do have this participative style of functioning. Participative style of functioning definitely would involve greater share of power amongst the subordinates. As you share means that you are involving people. People need to come together, they have to think about the task, they have to understand what needs to be done, and the awareness acceptance model also leads to the commitment. So, people get committed to the task. So, the leadership gets shared, consultation becomes much more prominent, people get energized around that leadership, which gives them an opportunity for them to exchange, opportunities for them to communicate. It is not just top down kind of a communication, it is also bottom up kind of a communication. So, there is a free and frank exchange of views and feelings in the participative style of communication. But we have also seen the third one. The third one comes as a kind of an ad hoc, laissez-faire kind of a communication and the leadership. In that situation, you see the leadership is not dominant or it is not active, but the problem with this kind of a laissez-faire is it is neither concerned with the task or the relationship. So, a clearly preferred style is one of participative style. However, when you see the participative style, the two dimensions becomes extremely important. Like this Blake and Moulton talked about concern for production and the concern for people, concern for relationship and the concern for task. So, when you see these kinds of two dimensions, there are managers who are neither bothered about the task nor about the people. Such leadership in the organization wastes the resources of the organization, it delays the production, it delays the task completion, and also does not involve and energize people. On the other side, you have a high concern for task, high concern for production, very low concern for people. Such situations makes people all the time moving towards the goal. However, they do have problems, they do have concerns, they do have views, but it gets suppressed. So it becomes, along with high concern for production, high concern for task, an exhibition of authoritarian or autocratic leadership, and that is the danger of getting into the high concern for production. But on the other side, you will also see this high concern for people, high concern for relationship, and very low concern for task. That kind of a leadership gets into the problem situation, because you run an organization like a country club, what Blake and Mountain talked about, like a country club manager. Then people come to the organization, they waste their time, they postpone the task, and they waste the resources of the organization, and people please each other, they do not bother about what needs to be achieved. Conflicts are suppressed, conflicts are ignored, and that is how the leadership becomes very ineffective. And when you start yielding to the people demands because of your high concern for relationship, what happens is the people also lose interest in the task. When emergency comes, when need comes for the task completion or for the task achievements, suddenly you will find your high concern for relationship won't help, because people are not trained to think, people are not trained to act, but they are only trained to please each other, and again that becomes a very ineffective kind of a leadership. But we have to move towards that high concern for task as well as high concern for people, and that is one of integration. It integrates the concerns of the people as well as requirements of the organization. So the managers need to develop this understanding of this framework, understanding of this leadership style. So when you have high concern for task as well as for the people, high concern for relationship and the high concern for task, suddenly you will find the group also comes with its own set of maturity. So it could be at the initial level, or they are used to a particular task, or they may be doing the same set of situations day in and day out. So as a leader, you must also respond to the concerns, the maturity of the subordinates. Sometimes a very active and participative style would be useful. Sometimes it may be desirable that you give all the expectations, but you withdraw and watch the group to perform. So people have talked about these contingency kinds of leadership, because there is no one effective best suited method for all situations. However, Vroom and Etten brought out another important concept of the leadership, that is decision making. So you need to see the several decision situations and characteristic of the decision itself, and when information is available, when alternatives are clear, so you may follow a particular style of informing the people. When the problems are so unstructured and when you do not have the details, alternatives are not available, when problem solving itself becomes more important, that is the time where you involve people, you run through a method of decision making which is consensus based but time consuming. So each of the styles have their distinct advantages as well as the limitations, but we cannot forget that there are set of traits. The trait theorists have argued over a period of time that there are some common traits are there, certain personality dispositions are available, and it is important to identify these traits and develop these traits from the beginning amongst the members of the organization. If you are the leader, then if you want to develop the leadership abilities amongst the group members, understand these traits. So that is where the agreeableness, the extraversion, so the concern for the others, so the traits which support some of these things can be developed. So the experiences can be provided to the individual, but there are also the arguments that set of these traits are inbound, so that there are born leaders and there are leaders who will emerge. So this emergent leadership and the born leadership took us to the field of this. There are charismatic leadership, charismatic, which comes as a persona or the personality of the individual, which is a combination of the ideas, the ideals, the views, the vision of the person. So when such expressions come, you see the followers are responding to the particular leader. You rarely know that how they have got this kind of a followership. So these followership are driven by vision, but also they do things which are much different compared to the others. So it is important to look at various dimensions of this leadership and how it functions and how it enables performance at different levels within the organization. So far we have seen all this: leadership, the definition and the concept, importance and the need for leadership, the types of leadership and the leadership theories. And in the next session we will link this leadership to the aspect of motivation. The motivation, the concept and the importance. We will also elaborate on the theory X and theory Y, what we talked about, the McGregors. We will also look at the various need systems and the ERG theory and the organizational culture which will support the motivation.